sensitized to.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Entin, in for Chris Cuomo tonight. Welcome to NewsNation. I am live on Bourbon Street tonight in New Orleans, the scene of yesterday's New Year's Day terror attack. I'll tell you, it's almost surreal out here. It is such a different vibe than what we had last night when we came to you live. Everything was shut down last night. There were bodies still in the street, 15 people dead. It was terrible, and it's just strange out here because it's almost like none of that happened. They've opened everything back up tonight. You can see Bourbon Street, everything behind me is open. You'll probably hear the music. There's a guy doing karaoke on a balcony up above me, and it's just strange to think what happened here just yesterday morning. Remember, it was 42-year-old Texas resident Shamsud Dim-Jabbar plowed through a crowd, killing 14 and leaving dozens more injured. Authorities are calling it an ISIS-inspired attack. Now, what exactly does that mean? We're going to dig into that in just a moment. ISIS-inspired. What does it mean? How did he learn about ISIS? We're going into all of it. Plus, we're not just covering that attack tonight. In a few minutes, we are going to go live to the scene in Las Vegas. This one is very mysterious. Also, a situation from yesterday, a Tesla Cybertruck. The video there exploded just outside a Trump hotel, killing the suspect and injuring 7 others. These 2 attacks occurred just hours from one another. Now, originally, the FBI thought perhaps these attacks could be connected. They've since backed away from that, even though the suspects in both of these cases, they had a lot of similarities. Both served in Afghanistan for the U.S. Army. They both served on the same military base in North Carolina, and both suspects rented vehicles through the same car-sharing app called Turo. A lot of similarities. Even the sheriff in Las Vegas today said for him, it's too soon to rule it out. I want to turn now to a couple of folks who can help us make more sense of all this. Former FBI agent Bobby Chacon and counterterrorism analyst and host of the Aaron Cohen Show, Aaron Cohen. I appreciate both of you gentlemen for being with me tonight. You know, let me just walk you through this. It's been kind of a wild day and a half in terms of the story from the FBI since I got to New Orleans. Early yesterday morning, you had the FBI coming out and saying, this is not terrorism. The mayor in the same press conference said, this is terrorism. A few hours later, they have another press conference and say, yes, this is terrorism. And the FBI goes a step farther and says, not only do we have one suspect, we believe that he had help. There could be more people out on the street. There might be more bombs. People need to be vigilant. We had John last night, Bobby, and people were on edge, thinking there could be like a terror cell in the United States that was about to be discovered. And then we wake up this morning. I go out to another press conference. It's a new person from the FBI. It's now an Assistant Director Reyes. They brought him in from D.C. to handle things, and he says that the storyline has now totally changed since yesterday, and they believe this guy in New Orleans was a lone wolf, that there's nothing to worry about, that they don't think anyone was helping him. A total 180 since yesterday. I want to play you a little bit of what I asked at that press conference, then we're going to talk about it.
The message has really changed since yesterday. Yesterday, the FBI said that people should be vigilant, that he did not act alone, that he likely had help. And now you're coming out the very next day and saying he was a lone wolf, everything is safe, the game moves on, everybody have a good time. How can you be so sure just 12 hours later?
In today's world, I get it. Information, we get information like that. Everybody lives in a 15-second TikTok video. We think that life operates like it does on our phones, and it just doesn't. Information changes. In fact, that's why we ask the media for patience.
We want to be transparent with the public. Years of the FBI not being transparent, we're being as transparent as we possibly can. Unfortunately, as we're being transparent, unfortunately for that, there is some information that we have to go back and recorrect. We're confident at this point that there is no accomplices.
All right, Bobby, I want to start with you because last night, same time, same place, I was talking to you, and we were talking about the fact that the FBI thought there were other people out there. It all changed this morning. What are we supposed to make of that?
Well, I mean, look, this is the nature of investigations. And, people, this demand for constant transparency is what happens. I've had, say, homicide investigations that I've worked where I've had 4 or 5 different suspects in the beginning, and I go down the road and they all look kind of good. You can rule 1 out and 2 out. And as you get down the road, you get to the final guy. But during the course of the investigation, all of them look good at one point or another, and you get derogatory information about them that maybe not be related to the homicide. And to make all that public immediately when you get it is a mistake. But it's this demand for transparency from moment one. Investigations change. It's not a 180. Look, and the FBI didn't state that this was not a terrorism. One person in the FBI, she was filling in for her boss who's on vacation. And she made a mistake. She was inexperienced in front of a microphone. So they sent in the big guns from Washington to correct her. It was one person made a mistake. It wasn't the organization saying this was not terrorism. One person made a mistake, so they corrected. This happens in the early days of an investigation. Mistakes get made. They don't normally get so publicized, but now we have this demand for transparency from moment one, and it impacts how the public feels about the investigating agencies because they don't understand the nature of investigations. They haven't done this for 30 years like I have. They haven't gone down a road thinking one person's guilty and getting to a certain point down that road going, oh, this is not our guy. Let's back up and let's forget about this other information that's irrelevant to the investigation that we know about this person that's derogatory because it's not relevant to public information. But now we live in a different world, and that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah, and yesterday there were the reports, and there was a law enforcement bulletin that went out that said there were 3 men and a woman who may have been caught on camera actually placing explosives here in New Orleans. Today, this assistant director said, we investigated, figured out that they were actually just bystanders, that they were not people helping with the attack. But that was something else that scared people. I want to show you guys, too. There's some new photos that just came out within the last hour or so. These are real surveillance photos that we have now that actually show the suspect on surveillance video. They're stills, but of him in New Orleans. He's sort of dressed up. There you go. It's interesting to see this angle of him. He's in jeans and he's got this kind of like nice coat on, and they actually show him walking around, and then he puts an IED, we learned today, into a cooler. We've got a picture of the cooler too, and they say that, well, there it is, the cooler. What they believe now is he's the only one who was placing explosives. But Aaron, I want to go to you though, because I get what Bobby's saying, that the investigation changes and as they learn more, but it seemed like a big change from telling everyone that there were people who helped him today saying he definitely acted alone. I mean, do you think, Aaron, we could get another narrative, another change tomorrow?
Well, I think Bobby's nailing it on the head. Investigations are fluid. I think as more information gets released, we're going to find out more about these both these individuals, with the Tesla in Vegas, and obviously with the attacker on Bourbon Street. But I got to tell you, Brian, my concern isn't about the investigation. That's not what's getting my heart pumping here. My concern is about the failure in the system, and the attack in New Orleans and Vegas highlight, in my opinion, some very critical flaws in America's overall counter-terror strategy. And our system I don't believe is designed to address these evolving threats that we're seeing today. And I think that there are serious problems throughout the federal agencies, including the FBI. We just saw it with Trump almost getting his head shot off. And I think that there's some competing priorities with these federal agencies that are not the best priorities that are going to focus on protecting Americans, including these DEI initiatives. I think it's too much, and I think it's distracting from the primary mission. And I think the federal government needs to get back to what they were mandated to do, which is focus only on protecting the American people. And with all due respect to Bobby, that woman came out. She was the deputy SAC, or the SAC of that office, and she came out and gave some very bad information at a very critical time. She shouldn't have been speaking. I'm glad they did pull the plug on her. But in my opinion, Brian, these attacks were preventable, both of them. The truck ramming, the Tesla explosion, all this could have been stopped. And that's how you deal with terrorism. It's about better intelligence and better intelligence coordination and proactive measures. I don't care about the investigation. No one does that better than Bobby and his team. I'm about solutions. And right now, America's not geared to be able to deal with an emerging terror threat. These guys, it's only going to get worse from here, Brian. This is where we're at right now. And there needs to be a lot of different creative solutions to start looking at how we get back on track with protecting America and putting together a whole new way of dealing with this. And it might include creating an entire new pure domestic counterterror agency here in the United States, specifically to deal with these emerging threats. That's how we do it in Israel. And we still can't stop them all, but we stop thousands of them a year. And that's where I'm at with this right now.
Yeah, and I get the point Bobby made that people make mistakes, but I mean, the fact she said, and this was the first big press conference when everyone found out that all these people were dead, that she said it wasn't terrorism, and then the mayor had just before it said it was terrorism. I was even sitting there watching, thinking, like, did she just make a mistake? Or it was very confusing, especially you just consider something different from the FBI. I mean, were you surprised, Bobby, to see they brought in this assistant director today to sort of run the show?
Not at all. Not at all. After that performance yesterday, and I'm not sure. Aaron used the term DEI hires. I don't know what the situation with this agent was, but that's a glaring mistake. And I can tell you, the retired Asian population that I'm in contact with every day cringed as soon as we heard it. And we don't know anything about the case, but we cringed as soon as we heard that announcement that's wrong. We knew it was wrong, and we didn't know anything about the case. You can't make that kind of statement at that point in time. And I'm dumbfounded to understand why she made it.
Yeah, and I think it just adds to people being more confused even today with the different narratives changing, and it just sort of started off on a bad foot. I want to turn the focus now, though, to like an even bigger mystery right now. Very strange case, the Tesla Cybertruck explosion right in front of the Trump Hotel in Vegas. The video is crazy. I want to welcome someone else into the conversation right now, live from Las Vegas, investigative reporter with Nexstar affiliate KLAS, David Charnes. This is one of our NewsNation local reporters. It's what makes NewsNation special. It's not like we've just flown a guy in to research this for the last couple of days. He's got local sources. He's been digging into this. He's outside the area where it happened. David, have we learned much more about this man, Matthew Livelsberger, who was inside the Tesla? Apparently, he was burned so badly they couldn't identify him, but then we also at the same time know that he also shot himself before the explosion. I mean, do we know much more about him or what may have led up to him wanting to do this?
Well, we know that Matthew Livelsberger drove more than 800 miles to go from Colorado Springs to here where we are at Las Vegas. I'm live here at the Las Vegas Metro Police headquarters, where they're trying to get as much information as they can from that burned Cybertruck. Teslas have a lot of different kind of cameras, a lot of technology, and they're trying to pull and salvage what they can from that vehicle at one of their bays here to get all that information. What we know about him was he really had a decorated history with the Army. He was with Special Forces. He was a Green Beret. He joined the Army in 2007. 2006. He's 37 years old. It would seem, though, when you're driving that far, it's not easy when you're in the West here to go from point A to point B. Traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles in a Tesla, which you have to keep charging, to do something like this. We know he rented this Cybertruck several days ago through an app and appeared to canvass the Trump Hotel here in the hour before this explosion. So at this point, from what we're seeing from what police and the FBI are telling us, this does seem to be something that was planned. But Brian, I have to tell you that when I saw this video, I just thought it was a truck after New Year's Eve, a Cybertruck after New Year's Eve. Someone has a bunch of leftover stuff in their trunk, and it was an accident. But my sources quickly telling me yesterday, no, you're kind of naive. This is no accident, and now they're trying to figure out exactly if this is tied to anything or if this was someone just trying to make a statement on the first day of the year.
Yeah, and people were trying to blame the Cybertruck in the beginning, saying this thing exploded, but it was quick to come out that they had the explosives and the fireworks and mortars inside the truck. It had nothing to do with the Cybertruck. Something else interesting, though, is President Biden has now come out twice and said he doesn't believe that the incident here in New Orleans and what happened in Vegas are necessarily connected. The FBI said it again today. But the sheriff in Las Vegas. And I was listening to the whole press conference today, was quick to point out that he's not ready to come to that conclusion that they're not connected. I want to play you what he said today.
How are we working to rule in or rule out any connections to the New Orleans event? And the answer to that is every tip and lead that comes in, every piece of evidence that comes in, we don't discount it. We work it through. It's an interesting thing during these kinds of investigations that if these turn out to be simply similarities, very strange similarities to have. And so we're not prepared to rule in or rule out anything at this point. There's lots more for us to do in this investigation.
So what do you make of this, Bobby, that the president of the United States is saying that there's no evidence they're connected and that the FBI is saying no evidence they're connected, but the sheriff there in Las Vegas today says that he's not ready to rule it out? What does it mean, Bobby?
Well, different people have both different thresholds before they meet something like that, an opinion and stuff like that, and then the level of information available to them. So the president has the information directly from the FBI. So if the FBI makes that conclusion, the president makes that conclusion. That's the same conclusion because they're working off the same set of information. The FBI has obviously gotten enough information where they're comfortable in making that pronouncement. Let me tell you, the FBI is usually very conservative when it comes to making those kinds of pronouncements. So I think that they probably have enough information on both cases that they're confident that they weren't. And by the same token, the sheriff is taking a very cautious approach, as he should. There's nothing wrong with that. It's probably a prudent position to take at his point because he's not privy to a lot of the information that the FBI has. So I think they're both kind of proper statements. I mean, the FBI is making it based on a lot more information that they know of, and the sheriff is being prudent in taking a cautious approach.
Aaron, the fact that this man in Vegas in the Cybertruck and the terrorist here in New Orleans both were in the Army, and the guy in Vegas apparently was a decorated soldier. You know, a number of medals and awards over the years. What do you make of that, Aaron? I mean, is that just a coincidence? I mean, it's certainly disturbing. As an American, it bothers you, but is this just a coincidence?
Well, yeah, Brian, it's an interesting question. So there's two different types of operations when it comes to terrorism. Bobby's specialty and what the FBI does better than anybody in the world, and I work as a reserve deputy. I have for almost 20 years, and I've worked with the FBI with my agency. No one does it better than these guys. And when it comes to peeling open these investigations, like Bobby said, they're going to take their time. Whether or not they're connected, I'm not sure how the FBI rules it, but from a counter-terror agency and the way that we look at it in Israel, we would consider all of this connected and suspect until it's proven otherwise. And the reason why is because with terrorism, we have to assume that everything is a threat until we dismiss it as not being a threat. And it allows us to get in front and stay in front of the threats or those potential targets or suicide bombers. And so as far as them being connected, I would say assume that they are at this point until the FBI and all these agencies start to unravel that and say, okay, you know what, these are two separate isolated events. One has nothing to do with the other. They're both veterans. They both served on the same base, but this is not related. And the fact that they both rented their cars using the same act, great. It's just a coincidence. However, I will say that the lack of communication between the agencies is what concerns me here. Bobby spoke to it just now. The fact that the sheriff isn't privy to the same information that Biden or President Biden is means that there isn't a very clear flow of intelligence or information. And that could just be for PR reasons, and that's fine. But when you're talking about counterterrorism operations, Brian, this gets back to what I was just talking about on that earlier question, which is I believe there needs to be a pure, dedicated domestic counterterror law enforcement agency that has the type of focus and efficiency, and I'm talking advanced AI, real-time intelligence sharing, with that focus on infrastructure security at its core. A lot of these agencies have a lot of different missions, but that type of agency would allow all of that information to coagulate perfectly efficiently so that you don't have blunders like this assistant special agent in charge who they yanked. And it just doesn't make the FBI look good. And there's no one better than the FBI. They're the best. And so I think there needs to a greater coordination here and a different way of looking at this thing again, Brian.
Brian, if I could.
Well, listen, I mean, the FBI...
The information that we know about this Special Forces soldier and what he participated in his service could be classified information. There could be some PTSD things that are medical information that they want to protect. They want to protect some of the operations he was involved in. If they have some of that information from his Army buddies, from his wife, they may not share that with the sheriff. They may say, look, this is an isolated incident, PTSD, it's suicide. But some of the information, the medical information and the operational information that this guy might have been involved in may be kept quiet because of the nature of that information.
Yeah, it's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. But the sheriff, when he had the press conference, the FBI was also in the room. They spoke too, so I'd assume that they've been communicating. But who knows? David, I want to go back to you real quick. One thing a lot of people asking me about on X is the fact that this man in the Tesla was burned so badly, they said he wasn't able to be identified initially, but they were able to determine that he shot himself first, but that his passport was found on him. Is that right? And they could see the passport? That's got people confused. Like, how did the car explode and you couldn't identify him, but was the passport in the car?
Yeah, so police did find the passport and some other identifying items around the car, including two guns, one of which they assumed that he shot himself with. And, the sheriff has kind of been the number one spokesperson for Tesla Cybertrucks because he said yesterday and he reiterated today that the truck itself prevented the explosion because of how it's built from hurting the building or damaging the building any further. There's really no damage to the building. There's just some, minor fire damage. So the truck itself, the way it's built, prevented some things from burning. I just want to comment a little bit what you were talking about before. I think the way that it works here with the FBI and the police is that the White House is probably getting the information last. And we found out some of that yesterday when they had a whole press conference here saying that they didn't think there was a connection. And then there was a statement from the White House. I believe there was a statement from the president saying there may be a connection. So I think the way the information is trickling down is kind of here out versus out in. But that's just my thought.
I mean, so the White House getting the information last. Okay, not exactly what I would have expected. And a lot of communication issues here in New Orleans, also in Vegas, apparently. David, Bobby, Aaron, I appreciate you all so much. I'm sure we'll be calling you on you in the coming days as the investigation continues. Thank you for coming on tonight. Okay, still to come, we are still learning more details about the suspect in the Bourbon Street attack. Who was he? How long had he been planning all of this? Was he radicalized by a terror group? How did that happen? And just how many more just like him are out there? We've got the answers next. All right, welcome back to our special coverage of the terror attack live from New Orleans. We are still learning more details about Shamsud Din-Jabbar, the man who plowed his truck into a New Year's celebration right behind me on Bourbon Street. It's awful, awful, killing 14 people, injuring dozens others. Who was Jabbar? Was he part of a homegrown terror group? And what could have driven a decorated military veteran to do something so awful? Last night I spoke with a longtime friend of Jabbar's and his family who told me he had spoken to his parents earlier that day. Take a listen.
We talked quite a bit today. They're shocked. They're saddened. They're very surprised. And embarrassed all at the same time.
There was even talk of him wanting to kill his own family. Did you hear about that? Have you heard about that?
What? No,
Yeah, there's.
No.
Yeah, there's some reporting that he had.
All I can say to that is, good God Almighty. No, I didn't know anything about that, and I'm sure the family didn't either.
All right, so to help us understand more about this killer is New York Times reporter Mike Baker, who spoke with family and friends of Jabbar, and to help us understand how big a problem homegrown terrorists are in our country, we've got Director of National Intelligence under President George W. Bush, John Negroponte. Thank you both for being with us. Mike, I want to start with you because you've been reporting on this for the last couple of days, talking to a lot of people who know this man. Any indication so far of what may have made him turn? Because you look at like the real estate video, he had this real estate video from 2020, looks like a normal guy. Have you figured out yet when that started to turn?
That has been the big question for us, trying to understand what that turning point was. You know, as you said, like here's a guy in the Army, gets deployed to Afghanistan, earns himself a global war on terrorism service medal in that, you know, and comes out of the military and essentially goes on to a really professional career in real estate. He's talking about cryptocurrency and investing. He, and then ends up in a six-figure job at the Deloitte consulting firm where he was working up until this New Year's Day. That what we were hearing from talking to people, talking to neighbors, talking to his family, was there was a turning point in recent months where they noticed him starting to act more erratically. Some dangerous behavior, so dangerous that his ex-wife had moved to try and limit his contact with their daughters. And, and friends also saw him as, and neighbors saw him as someone who's growing more isolated, right? He wasn't showing up at the nearby mosque where a lot of local Muslim families were going. And he was staying a lot of his time just inside the home, which, raises the big questions. What's going on behind those closed doors? Where is he getting his information about his faith? What is he turning to where there might be some indication of radicalization going on?
Mike, when you say dangerous behavior and that people were, family members were concerned, did they elaborate any more or any specifics?
I mean, there was just talk of, how he had started to talk. I mean, they used the word acting crazy, and he was doing more things that expressed in their mind a more fervent belief in his faith, things to do with his hair and how he was acting. And all those things combined was enough for them to feel like he was being dangerous, being unsafe, wasn't desired for him to be around his children anymore. And his children were 20 years old and 15 years old, his daughters. And so it was a big enough concern that his activity at that point was enough to try and push him away.
John, what do you make of this? What Mike's found out about this man, and is it possible that family and friends didn't know, thought something strange was happening with him, but had no idea that he was being radicalized?
Well, I think it's possible they didn't know. I mean, the way I read, I think the New York Times story today was that here was a man who was starting to become overwhelmed also with some of his personal financial problems and the problems he'd had with his marriages. And then, the world that he'd built that you described earlier, Deloitte and six-figure salaries and all of those kind of things, started to collapse around him. So whatever else was going on, and I don't know about the radicalization part, he was also under just sort of the real world pressures that we're all familiar with that can cause people to become psychologically disturbed at first and then possibly deranged. So I think there's two elements that are possibly at work here. Both the practical life problems that he was facing and then the radicalization issue.
Do you think, John, that our government, that the FBI has a hold on, these homegrown terrorists, radicalization? I mean, is there more of this than we realize? Because it seemed like for a while, at least to me, you didn't hear about this as much. And now all of a sudden we've got this situation in New Orleans. We don't know exactly what happened in Vegas, but could be a same kind of thing. I mean, is this happening more than we realize, John?
Well, I don't think necessarily. The way I read the situation in Vegas, and of course, eventually we're going to want to know more about the background of this individual and what kinds of problems he might have been facing that would cause him to want to commit suicide. It's clearly a suicide, but we want to know what the motivation was. and we don't at this point. And I think same with the situation in New Orleans. At the moment, I would not read this as necessarily an indication that we have some kind of generalized phenomenon of domestic terrorism in the United States. There have been incidents, but I think we have to keep them in perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that was very different than what our last guest said, Aaron Cohen, in the last segment, who believes that, the government's dropping the ball, that they're not keeping track of these things, John.
Well, I don't know how you can tell. If a guy's under this kind of economic pressure and he has some important turns in his life in the past few weeks or months, how are you necessarily going to be able to anticipate something like that? These are, at one point, a very individualized problem, and then they only become more generalized at a very late stage. Now, maybe the parents or the relatives, maybe the wife and others should have reported him more to the authorities earlier on, and that might have helped prevent this thing from happening. But I don't see that it's a given that we could have known about this in advance just because you create some new domestic agency. I have real problems with that suggestion.
Yeah, it makes sense. John Negroponte, Mike Baker, appreciate you both for coming on tonight, adding context into a lot that we still don't know or understand. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right, coming up next, the Sugar Bowl was supposed to be played just down the road for me yesterday, but got postponed to today. Many believed it was unsafe to still hold the game. But right before we went to the air, Notre Dame upset Georgia in one of the biggest college football games of the year. There were no safety issues. We've got attendees straight from the big game joining us out here. How safe did they feel? How tight was security? That's coming up next.
To honor and remember those affected by the horrific acts of violence that occurred yesterday morning in French Quarter here in New Orleans.
All right, so that was the moment of silence observed by college football players and fans ahead of today's Sugar Bowl held right here in New Orleans. The game ended right before our show with Notre Dame upsetting Georgia 23-10. The game was postponed after yesterday's terrorist attack. Some felt the game should not even have been held today for safety purposes, even though additional security measures were put in place. Now I want to talk to somebody who felt safe enough to go to the game. I've got Patrick Gall here with me. Also joining me again tonight, Dan Donovan, who specializes in large-scale events like the Super Bowl and also the Sugar Bowl. He specializes in securing them. I want to start, though, with you, Patrick. Come on over here. You just came from the game, so you're happy sports-wise. Your team won.
Go Irish, baby.
But what did you feel when you were there? I mean, obviously you were planning on going yesterday. Mm-hmm. Did it feel safe? What were you concerned about going?
I would say very safe. We woke up the other morning and heard about the attack, and obviously that was horrible, and our prayers are with all of them. But the second we walked out of our hotel, I mean, police and law enforcement everywhere. The thing that was super interesting to see is it wasn't just local police. I saw so many different uniforms, local, state, federal. So we're, very grateful for all of them, and we felt very safe.
Did you get the sense that most people stayed and wanted to come the next day, or did people leave?
It was certainly loud and packed in there, but I will say a lot of the ticket prices plunged out.
Yeah, so I noticed that.
Some people tried to get out, but no, it was a great atmosphere. Both teams were phenomenal fan bases. So, we had a really good time.
Yeah, some of the tickets, I think, I saw down to like $40-$50. There were like 600, which was insane.
Yes.
Dan, I want to ask you, do you think they made the right decision here? Because yesterday, the thought was there could still be terrorists on the loose, yet they said, we're still going to go ahead with the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we talked about it yesterday. The stadium team knows how to protect a building. And that's not that hard. That's simpler to do than protect a street where that attack took place, 2 nights ago. I mean, Brian, the real question is, how do we make sure that we're looking at the next event? And how do we ensure that we're putting the right security posture around all of these special events that are going on? A stadium has a hard physical perimeter. Yes, they extended that for this game. As your guest just said, there was multiple law enforcement agencies with that presence along the streets on the routes to the Superdome. This city knows how to do that. The challenge now is let's look at the next event, because we were just a month ago when we had a CEO gun down in New York. Just under a month ago, right? We had the Christmas attack in Germany, and now we had this on Bourbon Street. And we've got to start looking at these next events. And how do we put the right plans around these special events, especially these road closures, these opportunities for soft targets? The stadium's a hard target. And the people in New Orleans, the guys at the Superdome, the agencies, they know how to protect that building. You know, they do it every day. They do Super Bowls and they do all sorts of different events there. So the challenge is fan zones. The challenge is special events. We've got the World Cup coming up, right? And these cities are going to host these fan zones. How are they going to make sure those fan zones are safe? The stadium that's hosting the game, they're going to be well prepared. They're going to have a great plan.
Yeah, and they got the Super Bowl here in February. They're already preparing. I just want to ask you, Patrick, you're a young man. I'm curious. You know, I mean, something so terrible happened here yesterday morning. Things are back open. The game went on. Do you get the sense that people are nervous to come back out, party, go to the game, or have we just gotten so desensitized to these awful events that we just mentally move on, like almost immediately?
I think both are true. I think definitely people have been desensitized while recognizing how horrible this was. But I think the response has been so strong that people will want to come back. New Orleans has been so grateful so generous to us, and we've had such a great time here. I think people will want to come back for the Super Bowl. I think it'll be a great event.
I was just reading 11,000, we were talking earlier, 11,000 people did show up, apparently.
Oh,
that's why the tickets went down. I guess just there are people probably, maybe they couldn't make their flight or two, to make the changes.
I would imagine, that was more travel plans. I think the law enforcement has done a phenomenal job. The city has done a phenomenal job. This is such a great city. I don't know who wouldn't want to come here, so... Yeah.
Well, appreciate you coming out tonight, Patrick.
Thank you so
I hope
much.
you can enjoy the rest of your night.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there is something...
Go Irish.
I said it earlier. It's weird that people move on so quickly in our world today, but at the same time, it feels nice that we don't let the terrorists just sort of knock us down. Everybody goes into hiding. It seems like more like the American way. So, Patrick Gall, appreciate you. Dan Donovan, we appreciate you coming on again tonight, lending your expertise to us. And I hope you have a good night. Thank you so much.
And Brian, your last guest talked about it.
Yeah.
We got these socioeconomic factors out here. These aren't people that the agencies know who they are. This is an individual that had some bad things happen, and now he took it out on some people that didn't deserve it. And we've got to focus on those socioeconomic factors. That's what's causing our challenges.
Yeah, interesting point. All right, thank you very much. Still to come tonight, earlier today, Donald Trump posted this picture with the caption, "Back in 18 days." The photo's about to come up. "To be continued." So what did the president-elect mean by that? And what do these recent terror attacks mean for his administration? One of Trump's strongest supporters joins me next. I'm Brian Entin reporting live from Bourbon Street in New Orleans. What impact will these two New Year's Day attacks have on the incoming administration? Earlier today, Trump posted this message on Truth Social. It says, "Back in 18 days, to be continued." And yesterday, Trump took some heat, even from some Republicans, too, for posting a different post on Truth Social. We'll show you. It says, "This is what happens when you have open borders with weak, ineffective, and virtually non-existent leadership. The DOJ, FBI, and Democrat state and local prosecutors are incompetent and corrupt, having spent all of their waking hours unlawfully attacking their political opponent, me, rather than focusing on protecting Americans." So what can we expect from Trump and his new administration? I want to ask Tennessee Republican Congressman Tim Burchett. Congressman Burchett, it's always nice to see you. Happy New Year to you. I haven't seen you, obviously, since 2025 has come around. Sad state of affairs here in New Orleans. But what do you make of these Trump posts? I mean, I guess when I read them, I was thinking, especially when he's attacking Democrats, it's like he won. I mean, he's already won, and it seems like he's still almost in campaign mode.
Well, for some of us, you never leave campaign mode. I mean, I run every 2 years, so that's kind of, you would hope that we're held accountable with that. But I understand what the president's talking about. He's talking about the border situation. We've got all these people that are in here, and granted, apparently these two are not recent illegals that have come over the border. But what we've seen is the fact that these people are infiltrating organization and have contact with these folks, and there's something that's turning them against us. And we didn't have this before, and now we've got it now. But the border situation, you got to realize we've got over 100 known terrorists that are that we don't know where they are. And are these people getting to other members, embedded people in our system, and turning them, much more violent than they probably were? So there's a lot of questions that remain to be answered. We know these folks are in here. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of this.
Listen, obviously the border's a problem and there are dangerous people coming in, and we see examples of that all the time, and they kill and rape Americans, and we do the stories. But why did he have to immediately bring the border into this situation when we found out pretty soon after his post that these people had nothing to do with the border? They were American citizens. They were in the Army. It just seems like it almost dilutes, don't you think, the problem that actually exists on the border? Because now you got all these Democrats saying, oh, look, he just complains about everything and says it's the border and it's not even connected.
Well, if you take the section about where he says about the border out, the rest of it is very accurate. I feel like we've got a DOJ that has gone after Americans. We've got an FBI that is. I mean, you got to realize, mom and dads going to school board meetings have been labeled domestic terrorists. People that had the audacity to go pray in front of an abortion clinic, which folks like myself and a lot of people from my end of the world find that abortion is abhorrent. Are arrested in the middle of the night by our FBI. And we've got two people like this. Obviously, one of them we don't know about the one fellow that was found with a bullet in his head. Not sure how that occurred, if he was self-inflicted or somebody put him there and planted him there. But you've got one that has obviously had some real hatred towards this country and the people in it. And we've seen a pattern of this. We saw it overseas, and then we saw it here. And it's people of the same religious faith. So something's going on. And I think he's well to point that out. America is sick of our alphabet agencies being weaponized against us. I think
there is something weird about the Vegas situation, like you said. I mean, the bullet and the car on fire, but the passport was intact. I think we got a lot to learn there. Congressman Burchett, appreciate you coming on as always. Happy New Year.
It was one of Elon Musk's trucks as well, so I think there's a lot of signal going on there.
Yeah, strange situation. We got a lot to learn on that one, and New Orleans, too. All right, thank you, Congressman. We'll be back after this.